They stopped him at the gate of the company he built with his own sweat. The security guard did not even look him in the eyes. "Sir, your name is not on the list." The words fell like stones. Workers who once greeted him as chairman walked past as if he were a stranger. He stood there in the hot Lagos sun, watching the glass building reflect a life that had suddenly rejected him. His name was Tunde Adebayo, 42 years old, founder and former managing director of Adebayo Agro-Processing Limited. And on that morning, the man who carried the company on his back was not allowed to enter his own company. But the real question was not who stopped him. The real question was why. Tunde did not always wear polished shoes and tailored suits. He was born in a small village outside Ibadan, where the red earth stained your feet and poverty stained your dreams. His father farmed cassava on rented land, and his mother sold roasted corn by the roadside. From childhood, Tunde understood hunger, not just as a feeling in the stomach but as a presence in the house. He studied under a kerosene lamp that smoked more than it shone. Yet he carried something fierce inside him, a stubborn belief that education could bend destiny. He walked miles to school, endured ridicule for his torn uniform, and promised himself that one day he would build something that would feed not just his family but his entire community. After university in Lagos, where he studied agricultural economics, he refused to chase oil company jobs like his classmates. Instead, he returned to the soil that raised him. People laughed. "You went to university to become a farmer?" they asked. But Tunde saw what others ignored. He saw how farmers harvested tons of produce only to watch them rot due to lack of processing and storage. He saw middlemen exploit villagers who did not understand market prices. So he began small, buying cassava directly from local farmers and processing it into packaged gari and flour. He worked from a rented warehouse with second-hand machines that broke down almost every week. But he worked with dignity, and slowly, dignity began to pay. In the early years, Tunde slept on sacks of cassava inside the warehouse because he could not afford rent in town. He negotiated with drivers, begged suppliers for credit, and convinced skeptical farmers to trust him. There were nights when machines failed and he wept alone, asking God if dreams were only for rich men's children. Yet every setback sharpened his resolve. When he finally secured a small bank loan, he felt as if heaven had signed a contract with him. He hired his first 5 employees, all from his village. They called him Brother Tunde, not boss. Together, they turned sweat into progress. Orders increased. Supermarkets in Ibadan and Lagos began to stock his products. Hope had a smell, and it smelled like freshly processed cassava. By the 10th year, Adebayo Agro-Processing Limited had become one of the fastest-growing agro firms in the region. The company employed over 100 workers and supported thousands of farmers. Tunde's face appeared in local newspapers as a symbol of youth empowerment. Politicians invited him to conferences. Banks that once rejected him now offered him credit facilities with smiles. He moved his headquarters to a sleek glass building in Lagos. He bought a house for his parents and paid school fees for children in his village. To many, he was a success story. To himself, he was simply fulfilling a promise made under a smoking kerosene lamp. But success has a way of attracting not only applause but also envy. It was during an expansion phase that Tunde met Femi, a smooth-talking investment consultant introduced by a mutual friend. Femi claimed he could attract foreign investors to scale the company across West Africa. He spoke confidently about global markets and corporate restructuring. Tunde, though intelligent, had little experience with complex corporate governance. He trusted easily, especially those who seemed to share his vision. Femi proposed restructuring the company into a larger corporation with a board of directors. "This is how big companies grow," he said. The idea of taking Adebayo Agro International excited Tunde. He imagined farmers across Africa benefiting from the model he had built. He did not imagine that trust could become a trap. The restructuring process moved quickly. Lawyers drafted documents filled with technical language. Shares were redistributed to accommodate new investors. Femi assured Tund that as founder, he remained in control. Tund signed papers between meetings, believing the details had been handled professionally. He focused on production and expansion while the board handled corporate matters. For a while, everything seemed to improve. New capital flowed in. Equipment was upgraded. Marketing campaigns increased brand visibility. But gradually, subtle changes occurred. Board meetings were scheduled without him. Decisions were made and presented to him as conclusions rather than discussions. When he raised concerns, he was told not to be emotional. The company he birthed was slowly becoming unfamiliar. Rumors began to circulate among employees. Some whispered that external investors now owned majority shares. Tund dismissed it as gossip. He trusted Femi, who reassured him that everything was strategic. Yet he noticed that his signature was no longer required for certain transactions. Financial statements became harder to access. When he demanded transparency, tension filled the boardroom. Femi's smile turned tight. "We are protecting the company from instability," he said. Protecting the company from him. The irony cut deep. Tund had sacrificed sleep, comfort, and youth for this business. Now he felt like a visitor in his own house. Still, he believed truth would prevail. He did not prepare for betrayal to strike so publicly. The morning he was denied entry began like any other. He arrived early, carrying files for a scheduled strategy meeting. The security guard, a young man he personally approved for employment 2 years earlier, blocked his path. "Sir, I was instructed not to let you in." Tund thought it was a joke. But then he saw the new notice pinned at the reception, "Change of executive leadership." His name was absent. In its place was Femi's. Shock froze him. Calls to board members went unanswered. Finally, a formal email arrived stating that due to breach of fiduciary duties, he had been removed as managing director pending investigation. Investigation for what? He felt as if the ground beneath him had opened without warning. News spread quickly. Social media posts announced a leadership transition, subtly painting Tund as reckless and financially irresponsible. He watched his reputation unravel in real time. Employees who once sought his mentorship avoided his calls, afraid of aligning with someone labeled unstable. Farmers who depended on him called in confusion. His parents in the village heard rumors that he had stolen company funds. Shame traveled faster than truth. Tund withdrew into silence. At night, he replayed every document he had signed, every conversation he trusted. Had he been naive? Had ambition blinded him? Pain is heavy when it carries betrayal. He had lost not just a position but identity. The company bore his name, yet it rejected him. Determined to understand what happened, Tund sought legal advice. That was when the full weight of his mistake surfaced. During restructuring, he had unknowingly signed agreements diluting his shares below controlling interest. Certain clauses allowed the board to remove him with majority vote. Femi and the new investors had strategically positioned themselves. It was legal, though deeply unethical. Tund felt foolish. He had built a fortress but left the gate unguarded. He returned home that evening to find his wife, Amara, waiting with worried eyes. She did not ask accusing questions. She simply held his hands and said, "We will fight." In her quiet strength, he found a small flame of hope refusing to die. The legal battle drained him emotionally and financially. Court hearings were postponed repeatedly. Media narratives favored the new management, who presented polished reports claiming they were saving the company from collapse. Tund struggled to afford legal fees as his income disappeared. Friends advised him to move on and start another business. But how could he walk away from something carrying his father's name? This was not just about profit, it was about dignity. He visited the factory from a distance sometimes, watching trucks move in and out. Workers laughed, unaware of the storm surrounding ownership. He realized painfully that institutions can continue functioning even when founders are erased. Months turned into a year. During that period, Tund faced his darkest thoughts. He questioned his worth beyond the company. Without the title of managing director, who was he? He remembered his childhood promise under the kerosene lamp. That promise was never about fame, it was about impact. Slowly, he began visiting farmers again, listening to their challenges. Many complained that since new management took over, payment delays had increased and trust had weakened. The company's values were shifting. That realization stirred something in him. Maybe losing the building did not mean losing the mission. Maybe betrayal could become a teacher instead of a tombstone. Unexpectedly, cracks began appearing within the new leadership. Reports surfaced of mismanagement and strained relationships with suppliers. Investors prioritized short-term profit over community partnership. Production quality declined. Farmers who once felt respected now felt exploited. Tund watched from a distance, not with joy but with sadness. He knew sustainability required trust, not greed. Some employees secretly contacted him, apologizing for doubting him. They confessed that morale had dropped significantly. Hearing this both comforted and hurt him. It proved his leadership mattered, but it also confirmed that something precious was being destroyed. He realized that leadership is not just control of shares, it is control of hearts. One evening, while reviewing old notebooks, Tund found his original business plan written years ago. The pages were stained and worn, but the vision was clear: empower farmers, create fair markets, build community wealth. He smiled through tears. No board could remove that vision from him. With renewed determination, he decided to start again, this time wiser. He partnered directly with farmer cooperatives to establish a new processing venture structured transparently. He involved legal experts from the beginning and ensured shareholding agreements protected mission integrity. It was not easy convincing people to invest in a man publicly disgraced. But those who knew his character stood with him. Gradually, the new venture gained traction. Farmers returned, drawn by trust rather than advertisement. International development organizations interested in ethical agribusiness noticed his resilience. They admired not just his initial success but his refusal to surrender after betrayal. Funding arrived in modest amounts, enough to restart operations on a smaller scale. Tund worked longer hours than ever, yet with a different mindset. He was no longer chasing expansion for prestige. He was building a system resistant to manipulation. Pain had educated him. When journalists eventually approached him for comments about his previous company's internal conflicts, he spoke without bitterness. Mistakes were made, he said, but lessons were learned. Meanwhile, legal proceedings concerning his removal reached a turning point. Evidence surfaced that certain board disclosures had been intentionally misleading. Though the agreements were technically valid, ethical violations were undeniable. Under mounting pressure and declining performance, investors sought negotiation. They offered him a settlement and partial restoration of recognition as founder. Some expected him to return triumphantly. Tund surprised them. He declined to resume executive control. Instead, he requested formal acknowledgement of his role and financial compensation to fund his new cooperative model. Power no longer tempted him the same way. He understood that ownership without values is empty. The day the settlement was finalized, Tund returned to the original company's gate. Not to reclaim it, but to say goodbye. The same security guard who once blocked him greeted him nervously. This time, he entered as a guest. Walking through the corridors, memories flooded back. Sleepless nights, early victories, shared laughter. He felt no anger, only gratitude for the chapter that shaped him. In the boardroom, he signed final documents confirming his founder status and exit agreement. When he stepped outside, the sun felt warmer than before. He had entered once as a rejected man. He left as a wiser one. Years later, Tun's cooperative model expanded across several African countries, empowering thousands of farmers through transparent ownership structures. Business schools invited him to speak about corporate governance and ethical leadership. He shared his story openly, emphasizing the importance of understanding contracts and protecting vision with knowledge. Young entrepreneurs listened with wide eyes, some recognizing themselves in his early trust. Tund often said that the most painful day of his life was the day he was denied entry into his own company. Yet that day also became the seed of deeper growth. Loss stripped him of illusion and revealed purpose. In quiet moments, Tund visited his village and sat outside his childhood home. The kerosene lamp had long been replaced by electric light, but he kept the old lamp as a reminder. It symbolized humble beginnings and the promise that fueled him. He realized that companies are structures of steel and glass, but character is built from choices during suffering. Betrayal did not define him. Response did. Across Africa and the world, many entrepreneurs face similar stories: trust misplaced, agreements misunderstood, visions hijacked. His story became a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. It proved that being locked out does not mean being finished. Today, when people ask Tund what he felt standing at that gate years ago, he pauses thoughtfully. He remembers the heat, the humiliation, the confusion. But he also remembers the silent decision he made not to let bitterness consume him. That decision changed everything. He learned that power can be taken, titles can be stripped, buildings can be lost. Yet integrity, once protected, remains unshaken. His journey teaches that knowledge must guard passion, and trust must be balanced with wisdom. Most importantly, it teaches that sometimes life removes you from what you built so you can rebuild something even stronger. If this story moved you, do not keep it to yourself. Share it with someone chasing a dream. Leave a comment telling me, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, and how did you rise from it? Subscribe for more real-life inspired stories that remind us that even when doors close, purpose can still open wider ones.